Good morning and a very good evening, dear colleagues. It's been a real pleasure to join the fraternity in Brazil. And today I'm going to share with you some of my, you can say, ruminating ideas regarding one of my publications, which has been titled as the Securitization of Environmental Sustainability and its Critical Geopolitics. So the idea has been significant because we believe that the various agencies, institutions, both at the global level and at the domestic level, in all the major developing countries, have now invariably factored environmental concerns as the one of the most important area of consideration, and whether it's an administrative policy, or you can say the public policy formulations, or you have what we call as the economic aspects of the various state activities, we believe that the environmental considerations have become indispensable. And in this aspect, the academia, the scholarship has traditionally taken a position which is essentially, we call it as the securitization of the environmental concerns. And the very idea of securitization is actually derived from the notion that those concerns which are actually impinging upon the larger domain of your national interests, or you can say the tools or the instrumentalities where the social and political objectives have to be fulfilled. And in those areas, if you have environment as an important consideration in facilitating to meet out those objectives, then you need to securitize environmental consideration so that there is a, you can say, fulfillment of the objective of the state and the aspirations of the citizens. So based on this very simple hypothesis, we can further proceed that how this today's discussion delve into the area of securitization. My understanding has been that the various securitization studies that have been evolved are mostly in the domain of conventional security. And this conventional security is no doubt the prima facie case for securitization. But however, the constant elevation of the threats that you keep on modifying your security paradigms has led to the understanding that there is no static understanding of security challenges, and they keep on evolving. And one of the important understanding in this is that the certain threats are not simply coterminous with your political territories or the space. The threats may be, you can say, beyond your political borders. They may not emanate from your own territories. At the same time, the threats which you are emanating from your own territories may go beyond your own political borders. You may not be able to contain those threats. And also the fact is that the environmental considerations and the challenges which we see them as a prominent driver of concerns, they are variable over, they keep on varying over the time also. So this temporal and spatial variability of the environmental considerations make securitization of environmental concerns a little bit a tricky business. And that is why the idea was that how we can take the advantage of some of the pre-existing models in the domain of international studies, and we can tweak those models to create a kind of a policy space, or you can say the space where the nations can have a kind of a action plan, or even if not an action plan, but at least a blueprint where understanding can be developed on looking at the environment challenges and ability to meet them out successfully. So what is the traditional understanding of the environmental security concerns? The traditional approach has been that largely there have been the global institutions which are responsible for taking some kind of a empirical approach. And based on those empirical approach, certain reports and policies They give a kind of a narrative at the global level, the kind of variables such as temperatures, precipitation, the other climatic variables, and how they are changing over a period of time. And there is a concern which is then reciprocated by the action of you can say the on a global scale. On the other side of this global scale, there is a domestic level where the nations of the significant understanding, means the developed nations and those developing nations, where you can see them as a kind of a developing the capability of addressing the addressing the environmental concerns. These developing nations also try to formulate the environmental policies or environmental considerations in the part of their public policy domain. And these domestic and global somewhere try to meet the ends at various, you can say, intergovernmental agencies, or you can say various efforts that are being done. The deficit in this consideration is that there are several kinds of mismatch that have occurred over a period of time. And this mismatch has been evident in various climatic, you can say, the conferences, the various action plans that have been globally sought after. And you see that there is a perenniality of divergent opinions. Especially the most noticeable has been the divergence of the opinion between the global north and the global south. So these perenniality of divergences then become quite significant. And we believe that there is hardly any willingness to come over, or you can say to cross the bridge. And this part has some you can say bothersome scenario, because if we have this perennial tendency of north-south divide, then this is very difficult to come up with some kind of a convergent thesis where the countries which have the capacity and the countries which are having the resources can you can say complement each other in various designs of action. So this is something which draws our attention. Now, what significance the model which I am going to discuss now, or what is the rationale of having such a model? The rationale of having such a model is that the model which is known as the Professor Barry Buzan's approach of regional security complex, it is one of the unique tools which you can say, in some sense of its own awkwardness, because it actually looks at the international conflict only per se, and environmental considerations are only mere on the periphery. But this tool has a very important parameter which allows us to develop our own apparatus, and this is because of the region or the mesoscale, the scale at which this model operates. It is basically in between the domestic and the global level. So this region or the regional scale is quite significant. And when model speaks of various aspects of conflict resolution at this level, and it also indicates the fact that there is a deficit in resolving the conflicts because of the domestic aspects of the countries face, or the global relatively an autonomous tier of the global scenario of the international conflict. The author, Professor Buzan, is of the opinion that we need to understand that there are certain mesoscalar opportunities available in order to address the challenges of the regional security, and it can, in what you call the indirectly, address the larger issue of the global security. So this model has been quite popular. It has been, you can say, it started with the you can say initial viewing of South Asia as a test case. The theory and the model was developed by Professor Buzan on visualizing the you can say post-colonial South Asia. And that is why one of the reasons that my paper actually in the one of its culminating sections has tried to apply the model which I am going to discuss on South Asia. So this, you can say, collinearity of the interest and the argument of the regional security complex and its application on South Asia is motivated by the regional security complex theory, which has been given by Professor Buzan. Although I'm not going to discuss that theory, it has several editions of evolution, the stages it has which evolved, but the at the final stage where the theory actually looks into certain what you call the major parametric aspects of South Asian of aspects of the regional security complex. I think there are certain variables I would like to delineate that can help us in what you call identifying the pattern for the model which we are going to develop. So there are a couple of variables. Number one is that the states are actually in what you call the constant spinning of the orientation. That is whether there's a degree of enmity or there's a degree of amity. So sometimes you have issues that bring the states closer, and there are issues where the states are divergent, and this is a constant process. Then you have the geographical proximity, which is that the states, there's a neighborhood effect, which is important. And also then there is what you call the tier, the regional tier, where the power relations are important, and not only the domestic capability of the state, but the global powers are also present in that region, and also the ability of the state to project its power outside its political borders. That becomes also an important caveat. So these are a couple of, you can say, variables which we can bear in mind while constructing our own new model of the regional security approach that we would like to think of. So what exactly motivates us to develop the model? There are several reasons to it. The first reason is that whether and how we can securitize the environmental issues. This is quite important. And the need for securitizing the environmental issues at the same time also underscores the fact that in order to have a sustainability complex, there is equally a need to desecuritize the environmental issues. So please take note of it, that I am speaking of the two paradoxical things, but then this is not a paradox. It is actually the dialectical relationship which I am trying to explore. And here is that there is need for securitizing the environmental issues. And then at the same time, there's a need for desecuritization of the environmental issues. Now, what exactly I mean by saying the two opposite things, what I'm telling you is that when we try to identify the issues of concern, then they should be region specific rather than having the global narrative of environmental concerns. Here it means that you are actually securitizing these issues which are generic in nature, but they vary from region to region. So the considerations of temperature and precipitation, or the snow cover, or the biomass, they vary over Earth's surface. In fact, these very parameters are actually dependent on the distribution of the continent and the water body across the entire Earth's surface. So it is important to understand that this variability is important in identifying the nature of securitization. The process of desecuritization actually begins as a consequence of the regional transformation, where the states, once they are able to identify the issues, then the kind of a mutual antagonistic positions, they give way to the what you call the complementary and reciprocal actions. And then the idea that the desecuritization means that the goals are of that region, the specificities of those issues are regionally accepted by the members of that particular regional complex. So the idea is, in terms of, you can say, it is kind of a oscillating idea, where the securitization happens and then the desecuritization of the issues happen at the level. Now, again, this seemingly the kind of a fallacy, it has certain degree of other, you can say, kinematics. I'm using the word, because it is not the only in terms of the what you call the transformation of the region, but it can also indicate other kinds of securitization and desecuritization processes. One is what you call the short-term securitization and the long-term desecuritization. Means there are issues which are of immediate concern and urgent actions needed. I'm citing you the very example in the capital of India, Delhi, where I'm right now. The air quality index actually went as high as 700 to 900, which is actually much higher than what 400 it is called as a severe, hazardous. So there are immediate concerns and immediate attention and action is needed in these kind of situations. You may have other you can say climatic catastrophic scenarios where you are actually looking at the issues which need to be taken on the immediate basis. But then the long-term issue addresser of the problem is that you need to understand that why exactly this thing is and what are the impact on the neighborhood and how neighborhood can help us in alleviating this problem. So this is the what you call the long-term, or you can say the temporal securitization and desecuritization. Then there is also what you call the scale-based securitization and desecuritization, means that the issues which are at the regional level being securitized need not be go for a kind of a tautological securitization at the global level, that the same issues are being reflected at the global level. I think at the global level, you may go for some other issues of where the environmental concern based on the nature and the scale may be looking into those issues. For example, who is going to take care of the Arctics and the big oceans, where hardly there is any country's domain is there. I mean, open seas need to be taken care of. The polar areas need to be taken care of. So there can be a collective or common action plan of the countries, and it should be desecuritized in the long term as a kind of a global area. And the concerns such as biodiversity and the nature of addressing the climate, or you can say the temporal or temperature and precipitation issues, they should be looked at the regional level. That is my understanding of it. Now, the third aspect of the securitization and desecuritization has been the issue specific. There are issues which are of high risks, which can be and which need to be securitized at the urgent basis. And then there are issues which actually over a long period of time, they develop, or you can say there's a kind of a diastrophic behavior in which the change occurs over a longer period of time, and there is no you can say consistency of that behavior. So that can also be a kind of a approach which should be understood, that what should be prioritized first and what can be prioritized later on. So these are some of the shades of meaning and which I'm trying to put before I actually build my case of the regional environmental security complexes that I've been thinking of. So what has been done so far, the problem has been that most of the securitization exercise that has come to us in the form of a developed versus developing divide is through economic policies and the avenues of development, which are sugar. I mean, you can say the environmental security has been sugar coated by the developed countries in the form of offering the SOPs in lieu of the environmental compliances. So, for example, one such case that I actually mentioned in my paper also has been that the various policy standards in agriculture production and practices that have been codified by the European Union for the third world countries from where they are actually receiving the supplies for their food items. And in order to guarantee that kind of a regularity of supply chain, they actually keep on, you can say, issuing the new protocols, new sets of practices, new sets of values and norms that at some stage may stifle the role of agriculture in the producer country as an important driver of socio-economic change. So this is something which has often been the case when the the developed and the developing countries are at loggerheads while looking into the, you can say, these complementarities. And three sectors where this divide has been glaringly evident have been the sectors such as energy, sectors such as food, and the environment. So all these three sectors, energy, food, and environment, are critical for the, you can say, maintaining the supply chains across the globe. And in this scenario, the larger gest has been to have a kind of a globalized framework of environmental security concerns. And this securitization, in terms of economic policy, in terms of sanctions, where the political, you can say, instrument of compliance is being issued, there you find that the problem is that in over a period of time, these policy formats become a bone of contention and often are actually entangled into the regional geopolitics. So the considerations such as, for example, I would like to give you a very obvious case where the food, I mean, the grains and their supplies to the African countries and from where it is produced, it has all factored into what you call one of the present conflicts. And we see that how the food supply chains, similarly, there are other concerns of energy and environment. For example, the energy supply lines, how they have been affected, because the end scenario is that when the economics and politics keep on weighing too much on these concerns, the ultimate destiny of these three spheres is to have these geopolitical, you can say, ramifications in these areas. And that is why one of the important cases has been that when you can see that there is an inevitability of the geopolitics in these areas, so why not make some kind of a preemptive understanding in mitigating that geopolitical impact. And regional environmental security complexes, the one of the major purpose of this model has been to make the case against the further, you can say, the exaggeration of geopolitics, or you can say exacerbation of geopolitics in larger proportions. So this approach of regional environmental security complex takes care of this approach, also. Now, where to begin from, the model which I have proposed, it begins from the basic premise is that Earth is being divided into several biomes, and the interface which we are using of regional security complex is basically that there are regions which are driven by conflict, and their identity is actually essentially derived from the conflict. So in one biome, there may be more than one conflict, maybe more than one regional security conflict, security complex, or there may be biomes which are actually more than one biome within one regional security complex, or you can say there is a kind of a possible mismatch of the biomes and the regional security complexes. So what is the way out to this in this limitation or constraint while formulation of the model? The essential part that is important, that needs to be understood, is that the most important part has been the taken analogy from what you call the role of resource sharing in a watershed region, because this is something where the cue has been taken in my model, and I have tried to bring in the transboundary watershed river sharing arrangement as an important area of intersection between the geopolitics and the resources. And it is not just simply that geography plays an upper hand when you try to have a water resource allocation in an optimal way. It is the political will which is equally important just as the geographical landscape, and how you actually develop to have a kind of a reliable and acceptable allocation of resources such as water in a watershed region. So in the same way, the biomes and the conflict or the regional security complex, which they have a juxtaposition, we need to take a choice in how we can look into what you call the commonalities, or you can the similarities that bring this biome in conjunction to the regional complex. And in that, I have tried to put up a case that uh, the present environmental concerns and the degradation which has now affected practically in various forms across the globe, let us identify one unique, or you can say a set of unique environmental challenges within each regional security complex. So, for example, in the case of South Asia, when I try to identify, I brought that the pollution, or you can say the degradation of the air quality as well as the water, as two very important considerations in identifying the environmental challenges within the South Asian region. Now, the case here is that if you are able to identify these two as important considerations, then obviously the emphasis would be on how you are going to look into that challenge from the perspective of biome. So means the entire South Asian region should be treated as one watershed, possibly, or you can say the environmental conditions. And here I'm actually a bit lucky. I'm not able to I haven't applied in other areas, because South Asia has a very peculiar climatic you can say activities is known as monsoon. So the monsoons and the watershed of South Asia provide a kind of a unique insularity, where you can treat the prioritization of certain environmental considerations, which may be case with the other regional complexes or may not be the case, be subject to the investigation. But the point here is that since I have chosen South Asia to be the primary case of investigation, I got some success in identifying this approach. And here I believe that the essential idea has been that if you look into the conventional considerations of security challenges in the South Asian regional security complex, then it is the what you call the rivalry, the post-colonial experiences of the state. These are the important, you can say, basic delineators of the security threats and challenges. However, now the experience in South Asia has been it shows us that the proportion of the environmental considerations or environmental challenges is increasing, and the way the rainfall, the variability has caused havoc in Pakistan, the way it has caused havoc in various parts of India. The extent of air quality which is being, I mean, it's almost like 2 weeks from now I can see that the kind of a harrowing experiences, and especially the disease which are concerning with the breath and lung disease, which have spiked very high. And it is not the only I am talking about the capital Delhi. I think the recently Chief Minister of Pakistan's province of Punjab, Madam Mariam Bhutto, she had actually, sorry, Mariam Nawaz Sharif, she has actually written a letter to her counterpart of the Indian province of state of Punjab, the Chief Minister, regarding to let us take some step in mitigating this problem of air quality, which actually becomes so drastic in the sudden change of weather. And I believe that this was one of the areas where actually I have indicated in my paper that how the states where the consideration or the concerns for climatic challenges allow them to bring or to come together. And similarly, it's a wide ranging of considerations can be raised, and some kind of a sensitization can happen across the border, both where in India and Pakistan, or even say for that matter in India, Nepal, or India, Bangladesh. So this has been some of the you can say obvious fact, but the question What I want to underscore is that this is not it is not the area of trivializing this model, but the point here is that there has been a constant evidence of failure of coming to the terms when the regional conflicts are taken as a case. And whether you take as various scenarios, I mean, South Asia is an obvious case, but you can see how the West Asia is now, or Middle East, or you have the various other theaters such as East Asia. You have this constant failure of mitigation of conflict within that region. The point here is that though the conflicts have their own trajectory, it is somewhere overlapping, and the magnitude of environmental considerations or challenges have actually amplified in certain regions. And it is no longer affordable to have both the conflicts in perenniality and going side by side. And I think this is one of the motivating factors which allows us that let us redesignate these areas of regional security complexes as the areas of regional environmental security complex, and later then the transformation which is need to be achieved, we can treat them as a long-term policy domain, and desecuritizing that region to treat it as the regional environmental sustainability complex. Now, why I'm again emphasizing this environmental sustainability complex? Because when you speak in the light of the sustainable development goals, or the various global parameters you want to implement in terms of the human resource, or you can say the relationship between the man and environment, the problem here is that, again, the deficit which is seen across the globe is one of the reason has been the lack of match between the global policy prescriptions and the domestic level challenges. And I think at the regional level, if you have region specific, say for example, developing goals, and that is why I also advocated that instead of having the Millennium Development Goals, or you have the SDGs, why not have these regionalization of these goals, so that there is a kind of a reasonability and some realistic approach can be taken for the various regions. For example, this is very important from the point of view of the demographic pressure on the resources, which is also a very important factor so far as the environmental considerations are there. South Asia is a home to more than 2 billion people, and Africa as such a big continent is a home to 1 billion people. Now you can see the disparity of pressure on natural resources, and you cannot have the identical formulation for Africa and South Asia in that regard. So my submission here is that though I have looked at it from the perspective of, say, environmental securitization and desecuritization as a process, I think this model, which has been derivative of the regional security complex theory, gives us one of the dimensions where this model can be practiced and further developed in the direction. And this is the only evidence that I can put in favor of my model is that the recent COP29, what has happened in Baku. India actually almost revolted, and it was not the only country, supported by countries like Nigeria and Mali and other countries. Why? Because there was, again I am saying that there is a perceptive difference in realizing those goals, and this perceptive difference is largely one of the problems of global securitization. And if you have the region-specific goals and region-specific objectives, I think then you can really have a very serious formulation, because having announced $300 billion for the entire South, you are not really able to spell out what exactly would be the, you can say, approach or what would be the reasonable criteria in explaining those sum and how rational that expenditure is. So this is something which is quite important. And again, last but not the least, the important point is that, see, there are other currents of change which are also being witnessed in across the globe. And one of the most important is the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. Now, I am not really touting any specific about merit about this project, but what I important is that they are also region transforming projects, and especially in South Asia, Southeast Asia, the Mekong Ganga project has had a huge change in terms of topography, in terms of the land utilization, in terms of the resource utilization, and these big projects, they also have what you call the leverage on the environmental security concerns. So the point again here is that if you have a regional security complex approach, even as a mindset, then you can appreciate that what can be the possible impact of these projects and how these projects can help or they deter in reaching out the objectives of environmental challenges within that particular region. So this model approach it has an open-ended flexibility. It allows economic ventures of varying scale to be incorporated, and then you can have a multimodal understanding of this environmental sustainability complex. And I think various parts of the earth, they have their own pace of transition. The pace of transition which is witnessed by South Asia may not be similar to what is being witnessed by Latin America. And I think the policy, the prescription also need to bear in mind at what pace the policy should work and what are the implementing operatives that need to be deployed for particular kind of considerations. So that part can also be addressed only when you have a clear-cut understanding of the regional sustainability complexes. I think this is the most of the what you call the nitty-gritty of the approach, which I have tried to mention in my paper. And I believe the more discussion can be taken up by way of the Q&As. And I that is what actually from my side I had to speak on this entire model and the approach which I have taken. So Professor Antonio, Professor Niels, I hand over the down to you, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Dhaka. That was a fascinating lecture. And so rich, I would say, both in conceptual terms, but also in terms of its potential policy implications. So thank you very much for this initial outlining of your approach and your work here. Now, for all of the listeners that are with us now, who might have joined us recently, I will just again make a formal introduction here. So we have this lecture by Professor Ambrish Dhaka, who is a professor at the Center for Inner Asian Studies, School of International Studies with the Jawaharlal Nehru University in Delhi, India. And he's been working extensively on topics related to geopolitics, Afghanistan, geoeconomics, South Asia, and Central Asia, and geopolitics of Eurasian studies. And he's been publishing in prestigious journals such as Geopolitics and Eurasian Studies. So we're very grateful to have you with us today. My name is Niels Søndergaard, and I'm a professor at the Institute for International Relations at the University of Brasilia. And this lecture is part of a series of lectures called Rethinking Hegemonies, Power Transformations, and New Global Dynamics, which is organized at the Center by the Center for Global Studies at the University of Brasilia. So I think, as I mentioned, a very instigating, very interesting perspectives that you present here, both in conceptual terms, as it uses the securitization perspective with focus on regional security complexes as its point of departure, and then introduces the notion of regional environmental security complexes, which is a very fascinating conceptual innovation. And I also think you, Professor, makes a very compelling case for the use of that perspective, not only in relation to South Asia, but also in relation to as a useful and necessary tool to grasping some of the current environmental challenges that we face. I also think it goes very well in hand with the notion of, as you mentioned, as climate change as a phenomenon which shapes new regional geographies, as you mentioned, the monsoon, which sort of delimitates the areas and a political sphere within which these problems should be managed. And I think in that sense, we as political scientists from international relations can learn even more from geography as well, because geography is somehow the determining factor which shapes the political realities and the boundaries of the political realities in relation to which we have to engage collectively. So I think that's very interesting, this perspective you as you also a trained geographer can bring to the field of international relations. I would also say that apart from its conceptual contributions, it's also very important and politically timely, I would say, this perspective here. Here in Brazil, we face the challenges of managing the COP30 in Belém next year, which will take place on a very challenging political backdrop. And of course, Brazil is a country which has experiences within this field. Climate politics and environmental politics, has significant diplomatic capacities also to confront that challenge, but the backdrop is really, really complex. And especially something that's always been present within environmental discussions, this north-south divide is very salient today. And one thing that you mentioned that I think is quite interesting is also the difference in sustainability conceptions. Sustainability conceptions between North and South, and with this specific case of agriculture as well, which has been dominated by North and especially European sustainability conceptions. That's also something that has shaped both political disagreements in relation to Brazil and many of the discussions, like the degree to which European ideas have shaped that notion of agriculture. What is sustainable agriculture? And I do think that it's important that we evaluate also different southern sustainability conceptions. Also, if we talk specifically about Brazil, the potential benefits, not potential, the real benefits, but documenting the real benefits that can be reached through tropical agriculture and that sustainability contributions in that regard. So I think that's also just one example of this contextual sensitivity, how that is important. So this brings me to my first question here. Like, I think you mentioned the notion of environmental globalism, often entangled also with the dynamics of great power politics. And I see that somehow as contrasted to what you mentioned, a more pluralist perspective and a more, what can you say, regionally sensitive perspective, delimited by these geographies of the environmental challenges. So in that sense, I would like to ask you, do you see some kind of governance processes or some actors globally, say, be it institutions or states, that have moved in that direction towards a more regionally sensitive perspective of these challenges and environmental securitization? Can we begin, if we believe that that's the way to go and that is necessary in the future? Can we see some instances of evidence of that having taken place thus far?
Yeah. It's a very, very pertinent part of Niels, that when you look into the environmental globalism, again, we have what you call a sense of a dualism that grips our mind. Now, let me give you this dualism, what it stands for. If you look into the great powers, or you can say the major powers, the way the globalism works for them is a part of what you call the convenience of their national capacity to handle the environmental challenges, as well as the perception about the environmental challenges. For example, in my paper, I have quoted Norman Mayer's book, The Ultimate Security, The Environmental Basis of Political Security, and where actually the author has brought in what you call the how the agriculture regions and biomes can be viewed in the context of US national security interests. Now, this is something which the great powers can manage, and they have historically been managing this narrative. Now, what is the change in that narrative? The change in the narrative is that the way the new entrant has been, and China has been what you call the new entrant in this handling this narrative, and how they have dealt with this is remarkably different. They haven't advocated environmental considerations as a national security project, but what China has been doing in the western interior parts of the desert, such as Taklamakan Desert, where almost 300,000 square kilometers desert area is now being bounded by the green belt in order to contain this desertification. Now, this is quite stark in comparison to the perception which the great power America developed and the China as a national policy project developed. Now, in between, this global south has to locate where we should be locating ourselves. Now, we need a location where, based on our capacities, which are not as great as of those great powers, at the same time, we have an opportunity to have a collective action system. So the global south need to converge where we can collectively come up. And again, I am telling you, the regional tier is the most ideal tier where we can bring our actions collectively so that our ability to influence the actions where the environmental change or the kind of the change that needs to be efficated, we can bring that change. So the regional tier would be the most suitable tier for the global south. We cannot go the way the American perception goes, or neither we have the wherewithal where the Chinese capabilities work. We need a what you call more collective and concentrated approach, and where the regional understanding is best suited. And this global south needs to have kind of a, we can say it's kind of a several round table where the groups of 5 or 6 nations in a particular region take a certain leadership view and allow others to join into that. And there you can have what you call the entrants, where the great powers can also come up in some kind of a positive fashion, or you can see their domestic policies being converging into the larger framework.
Really interesting. You know, that leads me to think of another formulation and I think important points in your work that you mention. You talk about the structural environmental constraints placed on a state, and the tendency for great powers sometimes to characterize the free will environmentalism milieu as opposed to that. So I think this idea about structural environmental constraints is really important, and this is also interesting for someone trained in international relations, because we're used to looking at the structures as some of the key basis for the room of maneuver that states have. So these structures in classical international relations terms are defined by national capabilities, economic and military capabilities, and so forth and so on. But we also have this environmental dimension here, this very geophysical dimension, which and the way that it imposes itself in a more intensive way on states through the effects of climate change and other environmental events and developments accelerating. So that's what, at least that's the thoughts that come to my mind when I think of these structural environmental constraints, and also the very different capacities of states to confront those structural constraints. So I would just, before we head on to the questions from the audience here, and we are receiving more and more questions from the audience. That's really great. I would just like to ask you about how can we think of these structural environmental constraints and their different ways of imposing themselves on states today.
This specific structural environment considerations are actually motivated from the works of Harold and Margaret Sprout. They are actually now, I don't know, there's I mean, they haven't been quoted in now times, but I think these two scholars have done some very remarkable work in setting out what we call the fundamental bedrock of international relations, how the national capabilities can be factored into the what you call the environment, and when they actually draw a kind of a ontological development from the natural environment to the political environment. And this is somewhere the Sprout's work are quite, I mean, as a geographer, I found them very appealing to me. Now, here, when we speak of the structural environmental constraints, let me give you one very important aspect is that every nation has its own, we can say, the developmental trajectories. And you have also what you call certain characterization of the national land use. For example, degree of urbanization, what kind of energy resources you are actually having banking upon, what has been the trajectory of your industrialization, whether it's oil driven or a coal driven, and also your ability to have the kind of a transition where the huge costs are involved. For example, switching from the carbon-based fuels to the photovoltaic cells or EV. So the point here, what I want to make here is that sometimes the North is so impulsive in putting the prescriptions across the global South on these trajectories that the very idea of transition somewhere gets stuck into the costs, the rising costs of those transitions, and pushing the global South into hurried transition is not a wise thing. That is what actually one of the fundamental premises of regional security, the regional environmental sustainability complex model is that we have to have our different pace of transition based on each region's own characteristic nature. And that is where it is important that every regional environmental sustainability complex should be given its own merit of time to transition that is to be achieved. You cannot uniformly set the goals that by 2030 there should be this much of electric vehicles on the road. This should be the use of coal. This should be the use of petroleum. The point here is that the South has a very varied experience of post-colonial trajectories of development, as well as the internal spatial variations in development within those domestic sphere is also quite very much high, and you have to allow that margin in that the not only the beyond the political border, but within the domestic territory, the development trajectories are quite varied, and we cannot ignore those different pace of movement, and we have to allow some movement, get a space to that also. That is why structural constraints not only beyond the political borders, but it actually works both internally also as a constraint, because the nation's development path has been a unique experience for each global South country, unlike the developed North, which has much more cogency in their development.
That's just to piggyback on that point you're making there. Do you see that as being reflective of the notion of common but differentiated responsibilities? Yeah. Does that converge with the observations there?
Yeah, I mean the only fact is that once each region is able to have its own sustainability model, then the sum would be more than what, I mean, that is what actually this Marxian dialect is, that the sum of the parts, the whole is more than sum of the parts individually. So if the regional complexes are able to realize and optimize the goals in their own fashion, then the global objective can be achieved in its own automatically. That is what exactly I want to emphasize.
Okay, interesting. Now I will head on to some of the questions that we've been receiving from the audience, and I'll also highlight that we're very happy to see so many people following the debate. And please do feel free to post your questions on the chat. I think that will be very enriching for us to involve the audience in that way. So just heading on to the first question here, and the first question is from Diogo, and he asked you. You presented a fascinating proposal about transforming MDGs into regional sustainability development goals in regions like South Asia, where we see ongoing tensions. How would this transformation work in practice?
Yeah, see, one of the most important aspect has been the climate has a great relationship, especially in context of South Asia, with poverty. Because the dependence on agriculture in South Asia is very different from the other parts of the world. Here, the sustainability is not only from the environment perspective, but the sustainability of life, the human livelihood is also, because many, very large section of the South Asian population practice agriculture just for making its own, meeting its ends. So that is what you call the subsistence farming. So a climate, I mean, this is the most vulnerable section with the perspective from the point of view of the environmental degradation. If the environmental degradation happens, this is the most vulnerable section. So you have to appreciate this fact, that how you are able to link your environmental goals in terms of securitizing that population from the vulnerability of where the poverty becomes a multiplicative factor with the environmental degradation. So this securitization has to factor poverty as well. This is also important. So this, which may not be the case for every other region, but in, or maybe we can say in the varying fashion. But the importance here is that South Asia is home to more than 2 billion plus population, and the pressure on the resources plus the vulnerability factor, which makes almost things on the edge. So that is why I have tried to bring in this factor, that poverty elevation with environmental goals need to have a kind of a what you call the unique blend, where you want to and that is why actually it is not about poverty, it is the food security also factors into as an important factor for the population. And that is why the regional development goals have to have this unique combo. And the point here is not that how many elements you want to integrate. Point is that what combination you want to prescribe for particular region. For the same variables, African countries may have a very different set of combination. So this is what is important, because pressure on the land, the population, the nature of agriculture they are practicing, the subsistence, all this relationship makes unique in South Asia, which may not be for the case of Africa. So that is what actually my case is.
Interesting. I will head on to the next question here. We also had a question from João Victor, and he says, he asks you, your discussion of water resources in the SARESC was quite detailed. I'm curious about other cross-border environmental issues. How would the challenges like the severe air pollution affecting cities across South Asia fit into this framework?
Yeah, this is a very, you can say, growing challenge right now in South Asia, because the air quality in the world, actually, South Asia has become the what you call the worst geographical region, where the most of the urban areas, not only it's case of India, but in Pakistan and even Bangladesh, you have air quality as a severe challenge. So what exactly is the case? Now, if you want to, I will actually give you a little deeper explanation. The point here is that the temperature inversion, as we know from the basic school book learning, is something that the warm air gets trapped into the cold air. And this is what actually happens in entire South Asia, because the north of South Asia, there's a Tibetan plateau, which is 4,000 meters high. And what happens that whenever winter sets in, so the entire population of South Asia, means the belt which is running from Peshawar right up to Dhaka, is now having so much of urbanization that so much of energy consumption is there, whether it's urban areas or rural areas or even villages, that the density of consumption has actually given rise to such a scenario that heat is a constant process in that area. I mean, it's a kind of a simmering zone. And due to the what you call the Earth's rotation and the setting of the winter, the Tibetan plateau cold winds actually just jump over Himalayas and they come to this part. And what happens that suddenly there is a trap of warm air into the under the cold air, and there is a kind of a gas chamber effect that happens in South Asia. Now, question is that you cannot change the behavior of the Tibetan plateau winds. That is beyond human conception. What is the solution? Are you able to? Will you be able to deny the opportunity of, say, for example, the way villages were actually there in India or Pakistan for say 20 years back. The kind of development was there. Now people are actually having all kind of electric gadgets in their household. They use gas for cooking, which earlier used to be the natural fuel wood. So point here is that where the challenge lies. Essentially, challenge lies in what you call the transforming the what you call lives where the energy consumption and energy production are tweaked in favor of less heat production. If you are able to bring down that heat, it may be in maybe 3 or 4 major forms. For example, transportation, the domestic and industrial uses. Now, question here arises that how can you do this? It has a cost. Who is going to bear that cost? There are 2 ways of bearing the cost. One is that either somebody from outside South Asia funds that amount. If nobody is coming to help in South Asia, then how South Asians can do the situation? South Asians themselves can complement their economies. Let me tell you, underscore this fact that South Asia is economically least integrated region in the world. We trade more outside South Asia than we trade among ourselves. There is hardly any noticeable trade between India and Pakistan. So the problem is that when you produce everything, when you are getting everything done under this geographical region, then problem of heat will obviously be there. But if you have some degree of complementarities emerging across the region, some containment of the heat will be there. Then your technological transition will also be there. You may incentivize your neighbor with the technological transition because you have the technology. India has the better resource. India has the better capability to incentivize its neighbors for technology transition. So all those efforts need a collective, but then where is the significance lies? Significance lies in realizing this point that this has to be a unique solution for South Asian regional sustainability complex. It cannot be prescribed by any environmental agency from outside. It has to come by understanding what exactly is happening in South Asia. You have to look at as a from the perspective of like a doctor as a surgeon, that what surgery can be done from that part. And this is important. And here the mindset becomes important. And mindset can only work when you have the regional sustainability complex as a paradigm in your mind that, yes, this is our region, we have to deal it. And essential ideas should come in what you call bringing the new complementarities. That's my submission.
Thank you very much. This makes me think somehow that that one of the key problems also in relation to what we should, I think, view as common environmental challenges is also the collective action problem. When we talk about this problem in a global sense, that like populations can easily relate to the consequences of environmental problems as they perceive them, as they feel the lived consequences of that. But passing on those demands to governments and governments working at the global level to confront this really usually ends up confronting a lot of these collective action problems. So one thing that your points makes me think is that this regional perspective could also be a way, a framework within which there's a shorter distance from identifying problems to acting upon those problems, and that the causalities are much more present for politicians within that context, so that the concrete outcome of collective action is much more present, and it's much easier to feel the concrete consequences of well implemented policies. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely. See, again, this is one of the important aspects that when we use the term collective action, the region itself defines the scale of that action, and that is very important. Because sometimes the globalism or the global action, or you can say the collectivity, when it is the pan-regional collectivities, in a sense that action which is largely being sensed by global South as an important action. But the point is that as a narrative is important, but then action format at the regional specific level needs to be developed. So the complementary between the scales, or you can say the interoperability of the phenomena across the scales, has to be important. It is no denying fact that global level sensitization can only help the regional level do better, but the appreciation of that uniqueness of that region in terms of devising its own solution has to be appreciated.
Yes. Well, let me move on to the next question here. This question is from Ana Clara, and she asks you, you spoke about the environmental desecuritization as a path forward. Could you elaborate on how this might be achieved in regions where environmental issues have already become highly politicized security concerns?
See, I actually mentioned in the initial part of my lecture that the desecuritization is linked to securitization. And there is a dialectical relationship because the securitization helps you identify the uniqueness of the environmental concerns within that region, which are unique and particular to that region. And once you are able to, because the region building formation has to be done at the level of securitization, means where lies the challenge and identifying the challenge. Once that challenge is there and your region is being delimited by that challenge, then the idea to need to desecuritize means the state has to come at some new normal level, or you can say the states within that region has to develop a new normal level of interaction where this concern can be addressed as a kind of a regular feature. Means you need to develop a kind of a sustainability of action as well, not only the complex would mean by terming it as sustainable, it will not become sustainable. Your action will be the sustainable part that will render the region as a sustainable complex. So means it is a kind of a constructive approach that from identifying and securitization, now you have to do the action in terms of sustainable action, means the new normal behavior among the state interaction, means the idea of amity, where actually Buzan has underscored this importance. And he also speaks of the regional transformation, that how region can be transformed. So once the idea transforms from security to sustainability, that the transition automatically will happen. And there this point lies.
Very interesting. Now, I have some thoughts in relation to this notion that you present about the regional environmental security complexes, because I think it is a potentially really important conceptual innovation, development of the notion of security complexes, and I can't help but think about the context within we live here in South America, and a very obvious security complex which is circumscribed by geographies is obviously the Amazon region, which encompasses many countries in South America, and which poses very unique challenges, both traditional or non-traditional security challenges, human trafficking, drug trafficking, but also a lot of environmental security challenges, which are very closely interconnected by the Amazon, by the geography of the Amazon. And there's a lot of feedback loops as well. The Amazon is feeling the consequences of climate change and deforestation of the Amazon, and the lack of state power and the consolidation of state institutions within the Amazon also feeds into that process. So that's a very obvious, I would see that as a very obvious case to implement this notion of regional environmental security complexes. So I'm just curious now, looking forward, looking ahead, you published this article in 2023. Have you made any thoughts about, and I obviously know that your point of departure is South Asia, but do you have you looked at any other global regions in which you think that this could be interesting to implement this this concept? And also, speaking as a scholar, have you had discussions with scholars inserted within other global regions, or do you plan to further develop this concept as part of projects which could maybe make some kinds of comparative assessments within different global regional contexts?
two parts to this query, Person Niels. One is that my investigation in this area began with a difficulty, or you can say an apparent tension, being a geographer into the domain of international relations. So I somewhere wanted to justify position where I can actually reconcile this tension. And here the regional security complex theory gave me an opportunity for reconciling this position. Now, question arises that the point is that my actually domain has been, as you have also seen, that largely looking into the Central Asia, Afghanistan, and these considered areas. But the commonality fact is that these areas, conflict zones, have equal high amplitude of environmental challenges as well. Afghanistan does have its own share of environmental challenges. There's no doubt about it. But how we can carry this model to other part of the world? This is the second part of the question, where I believe that yes, Amazon can be a very important, you can say, a regional complex where we need to securitize the major challenges. Now, you can say this most obvious thumb rule is that the people and societies who own Amazon, who live there, and the population of that entire watershed region, how they are actually affected by those environmental security concerns. Because our investigation should begin from there, and then it should go right up to the hierarchy. So it's a kind of a bottom-up approach. Sometimes what happens that we started looking at the state policy and we try to go down to the policy. So if we start our investigation that where this catchment area is, how big is this, and it's a fairly big area, and a lot of countries share the Amazon basin, and how a Brazilian citizen living in the Amazon environs is affected, and what are the similarities with the Peruvian or other you can say Uruguay citizen, and where are the elements where the common ground can be explored in what you call how citizens of those catchment area can develop the ownership of Amazon. So once this is from the sprouts itself, I mean the most important investigation he actually developed was that from the communities who actually own that area. And once you develop the common domain, then your investigation into higher tiers of right up to policy formulation can go. And this is, I think, the safest approach in delimiting, though this may not sound in conjunction with the regional security complex theory, which Buzan has pointed out. But Buzan, in the last phase of his regional security complex theory, given ample weightage to the environmental consideration as well as the constructivist approach. So I would try to borrow that narratives and the projection of narratives need to be measured against the populations upon which the narratives are being built. So how Amazon is being projected need to be measured, that how Amazon people are facing that challenge and where the narrative is lying. If the narratives are in consonance with the real challenges of the Amazon people, then we can approve that narrative. And if there is a propaganda, then we have to counter that propaganda, that what exactly is being seen and what is being shown are the two different things. So this is where we can address the issue and approach the issue of regional sustainability complex in Latin America.
Thank you very much. I think I really think that the points you raised here are very relevant in relation to Latin America. And I think there's a potentially really fruitful dialogue to be had with Indian scholars as yourself who treat these challenges within the South Asian context, and with scholars here in Brazil who treat it in a South American context, and as I mentioned, also in the context of the Amazon. And I also think that your chosen venue of publication of your article is obviously really good in that sense, because the Brazilian journal, Revista Brasileira de Política Internacional, Brazilian Journal of International Politics, is amply read here in Brazil and many other countries in Latin America as well. So it's definitely a platform for spurring this dialogue, which I hope will then lead to, who knows, some fruitful corporations and knowledge exchanges in a South-South perspective here. So I think that's really good and it's really positive. I would like now on a closing remark just to hear, do you have any final remarks that you would like to leave for us for today?
I think I'm really thankful to the organizer, Professor Antonio, and you, Professor Niels, and the team which you have. And it's been really great interacting with you. In fact, I'm really gladdened by the fact that we are almost on the two different parts of the earth. I mean, the 11 hours of time gap is an evidence that despite how far we live, the semblance and the reverberations we have shared in terms of the papers and publication, or you can say the knowledge exchange which we have been able to do this. I think this exegesis has been a great experience for me, and I think this paper has been always. I mean, I think that the platform which was given by your journal to share these ideas, I think I express my deep gratitude what has been, because it's been really difficult sometimes to have what you call ideas coming from South and get them noticed. It's very difficult, because if I had been in the developed North and I would have been in some university there, it would have been very different story how to put an idea and how to come. So as a scholars from the developing South, we have this additional challenge of getting our ideas across the table. And I think I think the way you have teamed up, or you can the way we have teamed up with each other, it's been a very promising thing, and I see very hopeful, and especially the young scholars. I think my only purpose is to share with and how the young Brazilian students, they take up this case and they try to do this model approach in their own environments. I will be very happy to see that exercise coming up from Brazil. So my sincere thanks to Professor Antonio and you, especially Professor Niels, for this opportunity.
Well, we are also extremely thankful for your time and for sharing your ideas, and as I mentioned, I'm sure that this could be the point of departure for many future really good exchanges between us. So we're deeply grateful to you, and well, I know it's late there in Delhi now, so we won't take more of your time. Thank you so much. We are deeply grateful. And well, hope to see you soon somehow. Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.